What if the freedom you think you have isn't really freedom at all? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really provocative idea from Professor Zhang-Shu Qin. He argues that our whole consumer society, well, it's actually the most perfect form of slavery ever created. Yeah, I know. Let's just start with that conclusion, right? The perfection of slavery. I mean, that's a huge, kind of shocking thing to say. It forces you to ask, how on earth can our world, the one with endless choices and things to buy, be anything like slavery? To even begin to understand where he's coming from, we've got to go back a bit. So let's take that trip. We're heading back to the decades right after World War II. This period really set the stage for a completely different kind of society than the one we live in now. So, what's so interesting about this time? Well, it's that pretty much all industrial societies, and it didn't matter if they called themselves socialist or not, they all kind of bought into this idea that Karl Marx would have definitely recognized. They put the worker at the very center of everything. The thinking was pretty straightforward. Workers are the ones who create real, actual value. And you know what? This focus really paid off. Big time. Society was basically designed to make life better for working people and the middle class. And this wasn't just some vague concept. It led to actual tangible benefits. We're talking great public health care, good schools, and maybe the most important thing, stable, lifelong jobs. That's what built up that really strong middle class. Okay, so if the system was working so well for so many people, why on earth would you change it? I mean, that's the big question, right? If society was getting more equal, more prosperous for the average person, what happened? What could possibly be powerful enough to just slam the brakes on all that and throw it in reverse? Well, according to Professor Jiang, the answer is it wasn't a change that came from the people. Not at all. It was a revolution, but a revolution from the top. He calls it the revolt of the elite, and it really got going in the 1980s. Think about it. A society that's built around the worker, it just naturally becomes more equal. But for the folks at the very top, well, equality isn't really the goal. The goal is to build up wealth and power, and that requires inequality, not equality. So this trend toward a more level playing field, it was seen as a major threat. And that threat, that tension, is what lit the fuse for their revolt. And make no mistake, this wasn't some slow, gradual change. It was a full-on political revolution. You saw it in the US with the Reagan Revolution and the whole rise of neoliberalism. Over in the UK, you had Thatcherism. They were both pushing the same core idea: let the free market run everything, get the government out of the way. And that completely changed the game for how government, business, and regular people interacted. And if you want to see the result, just look at this. It's staggering. Back in the 70s, a CEO made, maybe 20 times what their average worker made? Okay. But today, that number has just exploded. It's over 300 times. This isn't just a chart with some numbers on it. This is a snapshot of a society being radically re-engineered. So, how did they do it? How do you actually pull off a shift this big? Well, if you want to tear down a society that's built around the worker, you have to replace that identity with something else. You've got to give people a new label, a new way to see themselves. And this is the absolute key to the whole argument. The basic promise of society, the social contract, it got a total rewrite. The old promise was basically, hey, you're a worker. We'll make sure you have a good, stable job for life. But the new promise? It was, hey, you're a consumer. We'll make sure you get low prices and a ton of stuff to choose from. See the switch? We went from being defined as producers to being defined as shoppers. So let's dig into that. What does that actually mean? What happens when you start thinking like a consumer all the time, instead like a worker? There's a really simple thought experiment that makes this super clear. Okay, so picture this. You've got a group of, say, 500 people, and poof, every single one of them overnight gets $1 million. Tax-free, no catch. What happens next? What do they do? Well, probably one person goes out and buys a massive house. They put pictures all over social media, right? Then their neighbor sees it, gets jealous, and says, I can do better than that. So they buy an even bigger house. And suddenly you've got this competition, this arms race for stuff. Pretty soon that $1 million isn't enough. People start going into debt just to keep up with the person next door. And what's the end result? The community, the sense of we, it's gone. It's just a bunch of isolated people, all suspicious of each other, all trapped in this loop of envy and debt. And that little story, that brings us right back to where we started. back to that really jarring statement about slavery. Because that mindset we just talked about, that's the key to the whole thing. See, once we get trained to think like consumers, we start applying that same logic to, well, to everything. A university stops being about expanding your mind and starts being about, what's the return on investment? How much money will this degree get me? Even relationships get viewed through this lens. It's not just about love, you start thinking about someone's financial prospects. Suddenly, everything and everyone has a price tag. It's a system of control that's totally different from anything that's come before. It doesn't need physical chains, it doesn't need guards or brute force. Its method of control is way more subtle and, the argument goes, way more effective. And here it is. This is the final piece of the puzzle. The perfection of this so-called slavery is that you don't know you're a slave. You actually think you're free. You mistake the freedom to pick between 1,000 different kinds of shoes for actual freedom. And because we believe we're making choices, because we're told we should like this endless competition for more stuff, the idea of rebelling against it, it doesn't even enter our minds. So Professor Zhang leaves us with one last, really chilling thought. It kind of echoes what the political scientist Francis Fukuyama once said about the end of history. Could this be it? Could consumerism be the final, most stable system of control ever invented? Think about it. It's a system that gives the people at the top exactly what they want, while keeping everyone else too busy, too in debt, and too focused on themselves to ever team up and challenge anything. A perfect system, and maybe, just maybe, a perfect prison.